but he has switched, and he has switched successfully to this move. 1d4, queen's pawn opening. What will we see Magnus do here? Will we see him go for the Queen's Gambit declined, where Prague has had a lot of games? Most likely we are heading in that direction. Black can bring his dark square bishop out with a check. Magnus has played that as well this tournament, but no, it is the Queen's Gambit declined, and one of the main lines so far.
I'm kind of hoping for a Slav, just to kind of test the statistics. But no, instead the bishop has come out. This is actually quite, it's a solid but dynamic opening. It's called the Rogozin defense.
Yeah, Magnus has barely played the Slav actually since 2016, his World Championship match against Karyakin and the kind of ensuing months. Meanwhile, yeah, very topical position. And Prague's teammate in the Olympiad in Chennai, Gukesh, of course, on board one, had a lot of success against the Rogozin. He got some fantastic positions with white against this traditionally quite solid opening. White's queen stepping back now. This is one of the main moves. And a question for black, how does black challenge in the center? White is slightly behind in piece development. White has wasted actually a move with his queen. He came forward with a check. He dropped the queen back later on. So she's on a good square now, but she has spent a few moves getting there. Yeah. And here black, I mean, there's several moves. You can move the black rook next to the black king. You can trade off a set of pawns. You can retreat black's dark square bishop. Variety of moves for Magnus. And I think Prague just wants to get out of this opening. He wants to maybe ask Magnus a few questions along the way, starting here.
Yeah, he chooses a safe and solid and reliable variation, actually, with the white pieces. I mean, because there was the possibility earlier on to kind of really liven up the game. But here, I think this is just sensible chess. And, yeah, white has moved the queen a few times. But then the argument is, well, take a look at the black knight that is sitting on the left. It's in front of its pawns, and this knight will have to relocate itself at some point or other.
Yeah, there's a lot of venom, actually. There's a lot of tricks kind of concealed in this opening setup for white. White is also very flexible, so one idea that Gukesh used, his Indian colleague there, was to castle the white king on the queen side, on the other side of the board, at some point, if black opens the center in the wrong way. And, yeah, you could... I was going to say this is also a very trendy move. Black's knight sitting on the edge of the board now. If I'm not mistaken, this was used by Ding in the Candidates tournament. It was also featured in the Olympiad. This black knight now sitting on the edge, attacking white's pawn, trying to force Prague to make a decision. And the key here is whether white can step forward and gain a bit of space with his pawn structure. Yeah. Magnus spiraling. Sorry, this was an idea by Caruana, sorry, against Ding.
No, you had it right. Ding against Caruana.
Yeah, Ding against Caruana.
In the Candidates. Oh. And there, you're totally right. White stepped forward with a pawn. One square.
Yeah, and that game was very, very interesting. And if it's good enough for Caruana, it's good enough for Carlsen. He follows all the top games. He follows the trends. I'm slightly surprised that Prague is thinking here for almost a minute now, because in terms of kind of topicality and how recent those kind of important games were in the Candidates tournament, he was following that tournament for sure. He will have seen this. Surely he has an idea. What do you think, Simon? Good idea by Magnus to try and surprise his young opponent?
Yeah, I mean, I think often whoever gets first surprise in gets the first strike, and it looks like Magnus has got the first surprise in. I am surprised it's the first surprise, if that makes sense, because as you mentioned, it is something that I would have thought Prague would be well aware of. He's just clarifying the centre now. This makes some sense, but you're also losing a lot of tension by making this exchange. This often heads the position more to equality, because you don't have that flexibility with the pawn that you had before. But I think he's just going for simple development, and again, you can't really fault that. Maybe he'll bring his dark square bishop out next, and I'm secretly hoping that he castles queenside. I really want to see the white king go queenside. I don't think it will now. It's too risky. But I wanted to see opposite side castling, because when that occurs, you often get some of the most interesting attacking positions. The one thing I would say, though, is that black's knight, Magnus's knight that he's moved, this is his problem piece in this whole variation. He's moved it to force or to tempt Prague into exchanging pawns, but that knight is now it's a pretty bad square, because you know, you might even get it trapped in some lines. So this is the one issue really that Magnus has in this position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so at some point he might well just kind of take a few tempi. It takes a long time, but just kind of trace its path back to maybe a more solid square. And OK, he doesn't want to take the slow approach here, Magnus Carlsen. He goes to challenge white in the centre immediately. This feels very ambitious. It could be very good. Black is ahead in development after all. White's king is still stuck in the middle of the board. Why not open things up while your opponent's king is there as a sitting duck? I guess the most critical now would be to capture this pawn. If you leave it to run, for example, if the white king castles, often it's actually quite nice for black to gain a bit of space now. The white bishop's forced back to a more passive square, and later the black pawns will start trying to advance on this left side. So I'm expecting Prague not to think for too long and then just capture this pawn.
I would have thought that Magnus would be very happy the way this has gone. One of the issues with this position for white is this dark square bishop. You can get similar positions in this opening, but with the dark square bishop, again, you've got to look at your own pieces, which are good and bad, and that bishop is trapped behind white's pawns. They're blocking it in, meaning it's a bit useless. Often you get the same position, but with the bishop on the other side of the pawns, which would be much more favourable, because it can definitely put more pressure on black's position. So my first instinct is, yeah, I think Magnus has got a little surprising with his knight jump, and I love the activity behind his last move, and I'm thinking he'll be very happy, just indicating also by how long Prague is taking on his move here. I think Magnus will be quite happy with this position so far.
Yeah, I mean, easy play for black. At some point he might bring his bishop out, at some point he might just kind of put his rook on a semi-open file. Easy moves for black, less easy moves for white. And Prague, deep in thought, he's still doing okay objectively, but he needs to play a bit more actively over the next few turns.
Yeah, I feel that this is brewing up really nicely, this position. So many possibilities, and somehow both sides have got like their bad pieces. And whilst this is a critical moment, we are running a quiz of the day where we are asking our viewers to caption this particular picture, and the best caption will win 1 year subscription of Chess24 Premium membership. And there we see the picture, and Rahul Agarwal says, when you realise your Uber Eats have crossed $1,500 already. That is a oh my God moment.
I wonder what Hans Niemann's Uber Eats bill is on.
I'm also
now,
curious.
That was many days ago.
I know. And Jens says, when you spend hours preparing for playing Magnus and he opens with 1A4. Also, it's like, yeah. And Pierre says, I hope no one saw that.
Or heard that, kind of looks like.
It does, yeah. I love those. So keep those captions coming. And remember, you can tweet them using the hashtag #ChessChamps. And remember, the best caption wins 1 year Chess24 Premium membership.
Yeah. And after 3 minutes, Prague makes his move.
He does make his move. It's the move we predicted here. You just didn't want to allow black to continue advancing on that left flank. Okay, he does capture that black pawn. Temporarily, Magnus is a pawn down. He's happy to just improve his worst place piece, re-centralize that knight. White's c-pawn isn't running anywhere anytime soon, so he will capture it on the next couple of moves. Prague, he just needs to castle. I'm sorry, Simon, I don't think it's safe enough to castle on the left side anymore.
I totally agree. I mean, there's too many open lines on the left-hand side, so I agree that white needs to get his king safe. I mean, just stick to the basics. You don't need to do anything outrageously, crazy at this point of the game.
Not yet.
Not yet. No, get castle, develop, and then you can start planning your next steps. And he's got, he's moving, he's slowing down a bit, isn't he, Prague? It just indicates he's not entirely happy with this. He normally plays the opening very confidently, very quickly. So again, I think wise opening choice for Magnus here.
Yeah. And with that knight retreat, there's probably a big threat by Magnus of opening up the centre, pushing that d-pawn forward. And whoa, Simon!
How did he make that move without using his hands?
Oh.
He's had his arms crossed the whole time.
Yeah, that trick again. This is the trick that makes him so strong. I don't know.
Telekinesis.
Yeah, that's it, the Jedi mind trick. And, with this last move, now the Black Knight has some ideas of diving in. And, Prague, I wouldn't have thought he wants to castle now, because he'll lose his very nice light square bishop, and you don't want to lose that piece. So he's moving his knight, and this is kind of good positionally, because he wants to control the square in front of what we call the isolated pawn, black's pawn in the middle of the board. And I think it was Spassky who actually said it's not the isolated pawn which is the weakness, it's the square in front of it. So I think it's this square in the middle that Prague's trying to get his knight into, but I'd be a little bit scared because I haven't castled yet, right?
Yeah.
I mean, come on, you've got a castle, Prague. Maybe the knight can jump in.
Yeah.
What about that for a move?
I was thinking that too.
He's played it.
And here he goes.
Will we see a reaction from Prague? Maybe we can get him on the picture, because it looks like this wasn't possible. It looks like white is going to gobble up this black bishop, but suddenly, after the knight captures the white bishop, this is a fork, the king and queen, a royal fork, both attacked at the same point, at the same time. Really weird move. Now you've retreated your knight, the black knight has jumped forward. You can't take this bishop, your queen is attacked, so the black knight is going to take one of the white bishops. If you capture this knight, then also you will regret leaving your king in the centre this long. It's a check. You have to move the knight that just did move. You have to retreat it back to where it came from. And block. Weird stuff.
Yeah, I mean, not castling, you know, it's very strange, very strange. He could have just done that first, and now, as you mentioned, he's going to lose one of his bishops. So I don't know how bad that is, but we know that Magnus is a great believer in the bishop pair. He loves having the two bishops, and long term, especially if he can get rid of his isolated pawn, that could be quite bad news for Prague in any ensuring ending. So which bishop would you give up here, though?
I'd give up the light squared one.
Yeah.
No questions.
So, for example, just step back with the queen, allow a capture here, and then at least this dark squared bishop has a nice home on this kind of long diagonal.
I might be giving up two bishops, actually, because the knight can jump forward and...
Take this guy.
Yeah, take this guy, and he goes for my recommendation. Not sure now.
And Magnus instantly captures that bishop. He has the bishop pair. We predicted well there, guys.
Yeah.
We predicted the continuation.
Makes a nice change. So,
yeah, it's about Magnus having the two bishops, white only having one. White's knights are OK, but
I mean, it's still...
it's maybe Magnus.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably still OK for white, isn't it? Because white does have this lovely square we mentioned in the middle of the board. You know, you can put a piece there and it can never be attacked by a pawn. This is the strength of playing against the isolated pawn. It doesn't have any friends next to it. It's like, what do we call it? Dilly no mates? I don't know why Dilly. Is Dilly even a name? Did I just make that up? Is Dilly actually a name? Does anyone know a Dilly around here? Dilly? Does anyone know a Dilly? I don't know a Dilly.
No, I don't. But I love it, Simon.
Dilly.
I am going to run with it for the rest of my chess career.
Dilly the D pawn.
David the D pawn.
I know, but I didn't want to say Dilly. I didn't want to say David No Mates because that's not true. This is Dilly No Mates.
Oh, Magnus heard your joke, Simon.
The Dilly the D pawn. I don't know a Dilly. I'm just.
Dilly feels a bit silly right now.
Oh, lovely. Silly Dilly. Oh. You're a silly Dilly. in the middle of the board. And, God, why Dilly?
Remember, it's all about the drama today, you guys.
Yeah,
Not the silly dilly.
it's dramatic on the clock as well. Look at the clock times, dramatic there. Prague thinking.
5 minutes down on the clock.
He's nervous, and Magnus immediately frowns after that last move. Normally when Magnus frowns, his opponent has slipped up. But, OK, it looks sensible to me, blocking Dilly in the centre of the board.
Dilly. I mean, yeah, I think that I came up with Dilly. I'm sure it's a dog's name. That's more of a dog's name than a human name. Sorry if there's loads of Dillies out there. I apologise to all Dillies, but I'm pretty sure that's a dog's name. It's like, you know, like Shep, Dilly.
I've heard of Tilly as a name.
Tilly.
And
yeah,
Billy,
Tilly.
of course.
Billy is normal.
And from now on, whenever we have a bad D-pawn,
It's going to be Dilly. Dilly no
If it's
mates.
a good D-pawn, then it's David. If it's a bad one,
I like that.
Silly
yeah.
Dilly.
Silly Dilly.
Yep.
Yeah, OK. Well, we've really gone off a little bit on tangent here, as per usual. And
Magnus enjoying it.
I don't think Magnus should be listening to our commentary. I don't think it would help his chess much either, to be honest. I mean, there is the question here, maybe black can throw the queen all the way into the position, but I still think it's pretty balanced here. But actually, look at the bar. It's got to get it in. I just realised it actually has gone somewhat. Is there a really strong idea here then, somewhere?
I'm trying to search. I don't see it, to be honest. Maybe this is the start of Magnus's idea. So Magnus loves pushing his rook's pawns, especially on the queen side. It's a noticeable kind of habit of his, but he kind of has enacted a 2-3 move plan with this last pawn push. He wants to activate black's light squared bishop, which is still sitting at home, still kind of asleep. He wants to activate it and start attacking the white queen. So still laughing there, Magnus. Just to show the top players in the world, they always have 2 to 3 move plans at a time. He's pushed his pawn forward. First of all, just opening up his rook. Maybe his rook wants to kind of swing across and start attacking, especially if white's king sits on this side of the board. But more importantly, I think his idea is to actually push his pawn and activate his bishop on this diagonal where it actually has some big targets. If the bishop lands there, maybe trouble for white. You've got to be really careful where you put your pieces now. So, yeah, interesting multi-purpose kind of flexible.
I love that move.
Yeah.
We often see that move in opening called the Budapest, where if white castles, that rook can swing all the way over. And has he forgotten how to castle in this game? Because, you know, it is important to castle. And now your idea of bringing the bishop out springs to mind, doesn't it? But both ideas very tempting here. And
Magnus looks really confused. He was frowning there. I mean, you can defend this bishop that's kind of semi-attacked by white's rook.
And now the bishop coming out, it's a killer.
I mean, why are you not castling Prague? I mean, you got to castle. Just stick to the basics. I mean, whether it's good or bad, you can't leave your king in the middle in a position like this. It's not going to last. So I really like this move that Magnus played, and he has just gone for the light square bishop, coming out, attacking the queen, gaining another tempo. And, he's...
How on earth is Praggnanandhaa going to unravel? Can we try and do some repair work for white here? Maybe he also has to push his a-pawn up the board.
Yeah, and at least here he could block with his knight, but already Prague is on the defence and Magnus looks in charge. I mean, already the queen is coming out, potentially threatening some nasty checkmating ideas, threatening this pawn. It's hanging by a thread now for Prague. Computer really doesn't like his position. Clock is against him. And maybe it's just that inexperience compared to Magnus. In these must-win situations, just play your normal game. It feels like Prague is trying to be a bit too flashy just by keeping his king in the centre. He's trying to be creative, trying to prioritise other things, but the position will become open at some point. Black's pieces are going to improve. And, OK, he solidifies the centre. And I guess he plans to meet this bishop move. Ugh. I was going to say with a queen retreat, it just looks odd, though. Your queen going back where she came from. This is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. The fourth time this queen has moved. No, fifth time this queen has moved, sorry. And it will only be move 18.
Wow.
Oof, yeah, it feels wrong. It just feels wrong. Look at the power of this bishop, especially cutting down on this diagonal.
Trouble for Prague in this game too. And remember, a lot is at stake. The winner in the FTX Crypto Cup gets a big portion of the $100,000 worth of Bitcoins. And there's also that very cool NFT trophy up for grabs with the picture of that player who wins the tournament. And an exclusive fan edition of that NFT trophy will be up for auction for 72 hours after this round of matches finishes. So when we have decided a winner, for 72 hours, you can bid on an exclusive version of that NFT trophy on chesschamps.io. So be ready for that. 2 moves on the board. Is it looking any better for Prague?
Unfortunately not. It's the 2 moves we predicted. Black's bishop lining up on this fantastic diagonal. It did hit the white queen, which retreated back to her starting square. 5 moves now by that white queen, and she's back home. So, yeah, don't try this. Kids, yeah, don't bring your queen out too early. She might get kicked around.
All right, Magnus, he is still with a lot of time on the clock, more than 10 minutes, with a big smile on his face, constantly laughing. He must be enjoying this position with the black pieces. It's looking good. Do you think he will win this game?
I think he's the favourite. Still a long way to go. You have great pieces as black, but the next step to kind of turn that into something more tangible, into a material advantage or into a bigger attack, still takes work. What do you guys think?
Yeah, Prague's ready to castle, right? I mean,
finally.
And yeah, if Prague can get castled, then that does take a lot of danger out of the position. So, is there any way? This is why Magnus has slowed down now. I mean, it's like in a game of chess, you can play a lot of moves very quickly, and you should play a lot of moves quite quickly, especially in this time control and their natural moves. But you only get like 3 critical moments. And this is certainly a critical moment because you could let the advantage go away. And I think it is an advantage at the moment if you let white gets what he wants. So I think he's got to come up with some disruptive moves now. You know, the first thought, try to see if you can bring the queen in, but maybe that doesn't achieve anything. Then you look at other areas. Is there any kind of threats that Magnus can create to try and put white off castling? Maybe pushing some pawns. This seems quite logical, but does it now, Prague? Come on, just castle. You've got to castle at some point.
Nothing else you can do, basically.
You've got to castle here. You can't leave your king there any longer, you know?
Yeah, no, he certainly can't. But can he castle? I mean, are there going to be some trades? Because there's a lot of unpleasant pressure along the light squares.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's true.
Let's investigate this, Jovanka. So the big question after black has brought his rook to a more central square is, can white castle? And you're talking about trades. So first, I guess you could capture the bishop. And here, white's knight is actually pinned along this diagonal, so the white knight cannot recapture. If you take back with the pawn, I think you might be in big trouble after a bishop capture here. Again, you've got to be careful of this pin, so you have to take back with the central pawn. Oh, I say big trouble. Maybe white's just about surviving. He does indeed castle here. For example, an attack against the white knight could just be defended against. It's hanging by a thread for white, but maybe it is hanging together. That's the key.
He had to castle, though, didn't he? I mean,
for better or worse, his king is safe at least.
Sometimes you just got to go for it, even if you're not that comfortable. But yeah, I mean, those exchanges are very close to being extremely strong for black. But if he doesn't, if he doesn't find something soon, I think white should be okay here.
Like for instance, now, I mean, there's so many captures on the board. For instance, you can actually go bishop takes knight. And then the whole idea is that, if you go bishop takes bishop, rook takes rook.
Yeah.
Bada bing, bada boom. That was my idea.
Nice. Sopranos, was that? Or
I don't know. I am
being a bit of Scarface in Miami,
I don't know where that came from, Simon.
Nice, I like it.
And here, black would win material, either the knight or bishop, knight or rook, sorry, on this diagonal. He has gone for your move, Jovanka. Bishop takes bishop, and that forces a recapture with a pawn. So bad bishop now for white.
Yeah, that's a horrible move to have to play, right? To take with a pawn there, because you've just killed your own bishop. Look at white's only bishop. It's just pointing at a brick wall now. And for the rest of the game, that bishop is going to be a bad piece. So this is just the kind of position I think Magnus will enjoy. I missed this capture. Nicely pointed out there, Jovanka. And I think, black has just a nice edge now with the better pieces. As simple as that.
Yeah. Uh-oh, what will happen for Prague? We're going to take a trip to Miami, where Tanya is following all the action. Do you guys, Tanya, think that Prague is in big trouble in this game?
Kaya, well, the first game might come to haunt Prague. That was his big moment, his big chance. And we know that against the world champ, when you get these opportunities, you really have to make the most of it. But the thing is, it's just so hard to beat Magnus, regardless of the position there is. You have to win a winning position as well against him. He does everything to make it hard. And the kind of opening he's played, it's been a dream start for him. We've got Grandmaster Alejandro Ramirez joining us to break down this position for us. Ale, this looks like trouble for Prague.
Oh, it's absolutely trouble, and you can tell that he spent some time, black did, capturing this bishop on d3, and you can see this beautiful dark squared bishop. That's why it's a different color than the rest of the pieces, because I just want to highlight how beautiful it is. It controls this diagonal. It means that this knight's going to be awkward for a while. The moment that you castle, this rook is going to land directly on the line of fire, and that means that there's going to be a lot of pressure in the center. Prague thought that he was outmaneuvering Carlsen in a strategical battle, but he must have completely missed this beautiful a5, b6, bishop a6. Slow, but very powerful.
This one has been flawless play by Magnus in the opening, but game one, that was a big opportunity there.
Magnus has been very shaky in the first rounds of this tournament, and Prague had to pounce on his opportunity. The more that Magnus plays, the better he gets, and I think he's now fired up, and you can see that's trouble for Praggnanandhaa.
So we have it, Kaya. Trouble for Prague. And the thing is that when Magnus gets his opportunities, he doesn't let them slip.
Yeah, that's true. We rarely see Magnus Carlsen slip up. Prague in trouble. It's all about then that beautiful black bishop.
Yeah, that beautiful black bishop, now the beautiful black knight in the middle of the board as well. If you compare and contrast the two bishops, I mean, Simon said white's bishop is terrible, but it only looks terrible because it has this fantastic rival, the black's light squared bishop. Opposite colour bishops tends to mean drawish tendencies, drawish qualities of the position, but not here. This is just, it's just so beautiful. It's just about, again, can Magnus turn that into winning a pawn? Can he turn it into maybe long-term good knight versus bad bishop scenario? He needs to turn it into something, Magnus, because it isn't the type of advantage that will last forever. And, OK, first of all, he activates his queen. nice and logical. Prague needs to survive. He needs to break out. Does he try and kick away this black knight from the center of the board? He's just kind of tangled in knots, tangled in webs, and he does try to kick the knight back.
I have to say, Magnus, as accurate as ever. I just love that queen move. I mean, it just completely ties down the white rooks. And
But big question now, what do you do with the knight?
I guess you have to go back, because, and I would probably go back to, nope, okay.
Commentator's curse as always. So,
Yeah.
I mean, this kind of move reminds me of something Bobby Fischer was quite famous for, right? Giving up a beautiful piece for a bad piece, but as David was maybe pointing out, trying to get something very tangible. So black needs to transfer his positional advantage into a material advantage or something direct. So surely he's got an idea here. I'm just trying to find out what the idea is. But there's obviously pressure against the c-pawn. He's just going to apply more pressure. And maybe the queen can come over to the queen side?
Yeah.
I can't.
Maybe can even dive in all the way
in.
to the e3 square.
That looks good, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, let's show this on the board, because Prague is coming under some concrete threats now. First threat to his knight. It's attacked from the bishop. The knight cannot move. The bishop is pinning it to the rook behind. And, of course, the black queen teaming up against the piece as well. So you have to defend it. If you defend it like this, as you guys mentioned, this looks like a very scary check. Hitting the king has to run away to the corner. Something feels like it's going to drop now. At the very least, I guess you can just kind of move your rook across. And, I mean, maybe white can survive, but it's not pretty. Another idea, as you also mentioned there, Simon, would be to swing the queen this way at some point. For example, if the white rook defends its knight, can you jump to this side of the board, go after this pawn? I don't know. It still feels like it should be able to, should be holding together for white if he defends correctly. But the big question now is this knight, which is attacked, do you defend it with this rook by stepping up, blocking any checks? Or do you defend it by stepping across? And Prague, with around 5 minutes now, he needs to defend these threats. And he also needs to cross his fingers and hope that no pawns are dropping off. This is the big weakness, the backward c-pawn. We call it backward because it can never, ever step forward without being captured. And it feels like somehow Magnus wants to win this guy. It's just, how is he going to do so? I don't see a breakthrough, to be honest, if white just defends his knight.
I do like your idea of jumping in with the queen and just moving the rook across. I mean, this looks very natural because black's improved every single one of his pieces. If you look at a black piece, they're all applying pressure to something. So this would be the, you know, OK, I'm not sure what to do, just going to put my piece in. And here, white has to move the knight, so this would be very forcing. And this would be a key position if... but you can't actually win a pawn here, I've just realised, because of the back rank, right?
Yeah. Not quite. If, for example, you trade off everything, it looks like you can finally pick off this backward pawn, but if you do capture, of course, you get checkmated on the back rank. So we are actually heading in this direction. We will see the white king park itself in the corner. There was no way you could ever step across and kind of walk into this eternal pin. You had to hide out in the corner of the board. The white king also vulnerable on the back rank. And here, Magnus, can he do something else? I have a feeling, just knowing Magnus, he wants to kind of play a tricky move, like inserting his queen as far into his opponent's camp as possible. So now, once the white knight moves, at least he can think about taking this pawn, this loose pawn on a2. He wants to win something, Magnus.
That looks good.
I mean, it looks horrendous for white, to be honest, I think. I mean, white's totally tied down, and he did... I mean, maybe he's going to put the queen in there after the knight jump. It's sort of a similar idea, and white's pieces are really just suffocating a bit here, and black's pieces are still ready to jump in. I mean, your queen move might even be more accurate, right? And we're going to get this variation now.
And
he's gone for the
he's going for the
Magnus.
endgame.
Careful of the back spanker.
He does love his endgame. Magnus is not going to walk into it. He's not going to surely get checkmated on this back rank.
No, he sees that and pushes forward with his g-pawn. And look how that pawn kind of controls the knight's circuits as well.
Yep. White's knight can never jump forward anymore. The white knight, in order to get back in the game, will have to retreat at some point, but it has no safe squares and big threat to win a pawn. Magnus is going to up the pressure. This is one weakness. The isolated pawn on the a2 square, also a weakness.
Do you
Good.
think Magnus is also perhaps going to push the a pawn as well, as far as up it can go, and then just move the bishop to...
If he can. I'm not sure I would want to fix my pawn on a light square, to be honest, but I mean, if you could fix this pawn here, then easy target, and black will win the game. Yeah, Prague still a lot of defence to be done. He might have survived the worst, but yeah, it's an uphill struggle. He defends the pawn with his rook, but the white rook is now passive.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the only move, actually, with the rook. I mean, you have to kind of grit your teeth and play ugly chess. Hold on, hold that door.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you could try pushing the pawn forwards now, I mean, but you might only do that if it's very forcing. I mean, I want to try to still win a pawn somehow, so I could do that. But the white knight also has no squares it can move to, because if it does, then you're going to lose a pawn. So there's many sort of different ways you can try to do this.
I mean, would this pawn push allow the white knight to retreat, though?
You can push it one square forward.
Well, that's what I want to do, yeah, again. But then you take the pawn.
I just take the pawn.
Yeah.
And because of the tension between these rooks, maybe white survives.
Yeah.
The white knight is defending its rook down here. So, yeah, right now, it's just about how Magnus can increase the advantage. If it were me, I would be wanting to kind of bring the rook in and go for a second weakness. Maybe Magnus, knowing him, he will preface this by improving the black king. Bunch of choice for the world champion. And, OK, clock time's now around level, so Prague still has chances to save this game. White needs to improve his king in the meantime.
Yep. He's on the back foot, though. I mean, this would be a great save. If Prague can now save this position, it's, you know, it'd be a great result for him, because let's just, you know, the tournament standings, if Prague loses this game, the only way he can win the whole competition is by winning the next 2 games. And that is going to be a really hard thing to achieve. So key game so far here, a draw would be a fantastic result for him.
Yeah, and is it that time of day, Jovanka? Predictions? Is Black going to win this game?
Oh, yeah. Percentages.
Percentages.
Yeah, Jovanka, our
stats expert.
Our guru, our stats. I'll be very interested to hear what stats you've got lined up here, Jovanka. So, yeah, what date for Magnus to win? What percentage?
Stop it, guys.
No pressure.
You've been 100% correct so far. 100% correct. You've got
the biggest day of Praggnanandhaa's career.
I know. So,
I know.
So Magnus to win. Come on,
Magnus
percentage.
to win.
This position.
It looks so good.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to go 55%.
55?
Yes.
What's wrong with you're normally a 90%er. 55 is. Did you expect that, Dave?
No,
I didn't expect it to be so low.
Yeah.
I thought it'd be up there in the 80s or something.
At least.
At least, yeah. Wow. Okay, 55.
It's just I've been so confident with my other predictions, and then, you know, things have turned around and I've had to kind of live
start
life
doubting
on
yourself.
the edge. Yeah, exactly.
Don't doubt yourself. Go for it.
But do you just have faith in Prague's defensive skills? Maybe that's the reason.
No, well, no, I would just base it on the fact that I do. No, I think this position is terrible. I mean, I think that there's...
Probably at least 56. Push it up a percentage.
OK,
Yeah.
OK, I'll round up to 60. OK, I'll go up 10%, 65%. There you go.
So do you think Prague has, what, 30% drawing, 35% drawing?
Yeah.
And 5% winning chance?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think he's got
Right.
0%
Okay,
chance.
so-
There you go.
Well, there's always a...
There's always, I know, there's always like a mouse slip. There's always something going to go wrong. But I like to live life on the edge. You know, I'm going to go for it.
So you're going 60?
Certainty,
Okay.
confidence is key.
I mean, I think Magnus is big favourite to win this one. I mean, OK, now White's going for a little counter-attack. I mean, if you can get that knight in the game, and that knight is trying to target one of Black's pawns,
It's
right?
not going to get in the game because after this rook steps forward, the black rook is also going to step forward as well and just keep its eye on. Or hang on, maybe the bishop could come down and attack. Ooh, so many possibilities.
I think Prague just wants to curl up into a ball and defend everything. He wants to put his knight on a passive square. He wants to hope that there's no way through for Black. But, yeah, interesting standoff. White's going to have 2 passive pieces. Black is going to have 2 active pieces. But I don't see an immediate breakthrough. I don't think exchanging off Black's bishop for the white knight is going to win the game. Black's bishop is just too good. So what next? Prague looks a bit more confident now than he did as well. Magnus is burning a lot of time trying to find this kind of next step forward. White's knight is just going to park itself behind the white rook. And what do you do next? As Carlsen. OK, here we go. The black rook eyeing up 2 different pawns. Jovanka's idea now of the black bishop coming in is a threat. There we go, the white knight. Poor piece, but...
Knight stable.
It was necessary,
incoming,
yeah.
Maybe. Get the knight stable, then, but then you've got to win that, right? So Oh, he's going all crafty.
Yeah, Black's bishop wants to come and attack this white rook. Kick it off a light square.
A little wriggler. And that's a nice idea, actually. I didn't see that one. Keeping the threats alive.
Very clever.
Yeah.
And we can point out the threat now. Magnus utilising his bishop on this square. Here he's just going to do a zigzag, as Simon mentioned. This is maybe the most natural move. The bishop kind of with its kind of gaze on these diagonals traps the white knight. But instead he found a more direct route. He's going to zigzag forward to attack this rook. And how do you save the pawn? White's rook is stuck defending the pawn in front of it. How do you save it? I don't see it. White's king is just so bad.
It's gone up to 61%, that's for sure. No doubt about it here. I mean, well, you're going to lose a pawn. I mean, you're a pawn down, but also the bishop is really so much better than the knight in nearly every position. And that's a long-term issue as well as being a pawn down, isn't it? I mean,
maybe...
How can you fight? How can you even fight here?
Do you just bring your king across and as soon as you get hit, maybe you could try and go active? Black can win this pawn attacking the white knight moves. The problem is, I guess Black just steps back. Black just says, okay, I've won a pawn, I've pocketed that one. I will just start marching soon. He does play the king move. White's king was just terrible in the corner.
Yeah.
The problem is, White can continue attacking pawns, but everything's just defended for Black. And this 2 versus 1 will eventually, most likely, win the game.
Well, he has to go for this. I mean, there's just no other option. And maybe the knight can go to a different square, but no, it goes to the e2 square. And I think we're going to see the line that we have on the analysis board.
Yeah. At least here you've kind of, OK, you're hitting the black rook. At least when it retreats, you've rendered it passive. The black rook is kind of stuck defending the pawn next to it for a while. For example, if you step forward, again, the black rook is forced to kind of passively defend these 2 pawns. So you've activated your pieces with white. Your pieces have not been better than this for the whole game, but you are a pawn down. Yeah, I mean, Prague, he's just trying to go for practical chances. Maybe he'll just put everything on dark squares, king on a dark square, put this pawn on dark square, this pawn on dark square, and he'll say, OK, at least it's going to be difficult for Black to convert.
One other thing that I saw was that maybe instead of moving the knight to attack the pawn, maybe the king can just step forward with the idea, oh, well, Magnus.
Magnus, wow. He doesn't even go back to defend this pawn. He steps his rook back 1 square, and the computer doesn't like that. Magnus, he's reacting. What is his idea if rook takes pawn right now?
I guess it's bishop d1, is it? I mean, he wants the rook and pawn ending. Is that right?
Does he really? I mean,
maybe.
For example, if white defends, maybe this is winning for black, but with rook endgames, it's always less clear, right? I would rather have more pieces on the board.
No, I agree. I mean, this seems strange to swap the bishop for that knight, because it did seem that knight was not a fantastic piece.
I think he wants the a pawn. I think if you go to grab that, yeah, he's going to put his rook down to the second. Nope, Simon, you were absolutely right. Yeah. He played so quickly as well.
Yeah, I mean...
he seemed to react, Magnus. Has he missed something? Have we missed something? I mean, first of all, what happens if you just defend the knight with your... if you defend it with the king, I guess there'll be a trade, and maybe Black doesn't take this pawn. Black goes to the second rank, and too many targets here.
Still looks very tricky, doesn't it, for
very
white
tricky.
here? I mean, normally Magnus' decisions are spot on when it comes to exchanges. I've noticed this, that he's incredibly clever. I don't know if that's the case here or not, but generally the rook and pawn ending is going to be very hard to defend for Prague. He's got chances, of course, but I mean, do you even need? I mean, if the king goes across, you can bring your rook in as well if you want to, if you really want to keep that bishop. But still tough for white. This
still very tough. I'm surprised the evaluation bar says it's less than 1 now in Black's favour, because it still looks like he'll win a pawn, and Prague is going to be on the defensive for the rest of the game. Under 1 minute now, the young Indian. Oof. I mean, if it wasn't Magnus Carlsen, you would be quite confident that you kind of improved your position with white. You have some drawing chances now, but Black against the best endgame player in history, not going to be easy. Prague will need all of his fighting spirit here.
Who do you think is the next best endgame player of all time? So you said Magnus, best endgame player, and who would you put up there with Magnus? We had the move that you predicted. It's nothing changed. Who have you?
Tricky.
It's a tricky question.
Is Magnus by far the best?
I wouldn't say by far, but I mean, in this era where everyone is so much better at defending than they used to be just 20, 30 years ago, and he's still the dominant endgame player, I would say Magnus.
Yeah.
I think it also was different time then, because I remember in the old books you kind of read all about the Germans, how they used to got to a certain stage and they'd be like, no, let's stop the game. And then they would crack open the books and bring their friends around, and everyone would work together to find these amazing, incredible endgame resources. Now, you can't do that.
What's happening, David?
Very strange move there. I mean, moving the king away from the centre, I mean, that's not a Capablanca move, is it?
No,
Weird stuff.
But he's allowing a check.
I mean, I guess he's going to go for Dilly the D pawn, silly Dilly, and try to round that one up. That's the idea, and trying to get into a drawn position that Prague is pretty confident, because this is one. If you swap off the A pawn and the D pawn, then this is one of the first rook ending positions you should know. But you don't have to do that.
Yeah,
so.
look at Magnus. We see his screen there. He was very happy to push his rook's pawn forward, Alice the A pawn, and he'll do this in any position, opening, middle game, end game. And now White can't keep his A pawn alive, his equivalent. Prague was banking on the fact that he could win one of Black's 2 remaining pawns on the left half of the board, but that left half, maybe Black can just sit, and I mean, there's no threat for White. The Black king can start improving now, and the Black pawns can move. It just feels odd to go for this willingly when the White king was so well placed in the centre.
But I mean, is this one so winning? You know, because after all, White does have a threat of actually sliding the rook over one square to the left, attacking the pawn, and then one pawn will drop.
We never said winning, just maybe
okay.
it was easier to defend. I mean, also, Black can, at some point, put his rook on a square that defends both of the 2 black pawns. So if the Black king can centralise, it's not 100% clear to me whether you can win one of those 2 black pawns.
Time getting very short for both players. I mean, worth just keeping an eye on the clock there. They're both getting quite close to having only a minute left, and it looks like that will be the situation. So it's really going to go on endgame instinct shortly. And I think Prague, you can sort of sense him when he does this sort of bouncing. You know, when he starts bouncing about, you can sense I think he feels a bit more confident, and he gets that. He uses that innate energy, doesn't he, to sort of transform it onto the board. And I expect a lot of these technical positions, what I mean technical positions, if another pair of pawns get exchanged off, that Prague will have drilled so often with his coach Ramesh. I mean, it's the first kind of endings you really train. So he's probably still holding with about 45%, I reckon. So your prediction was spot on, Jovanka, as always.
I don't know. And he steps back with the rook, and the whole idea is simply to force the rook to capture the pawn, and then he will slide to the middle of the board and attack the pawn. So the D pawn will fall off.
Poor Dilly.
Poor Dilly.
Poor Dilly.
He's always she was always a goner.
She was.
Yeah,
she
she
was.
was a good lass.
She didn't.
She had a decent time, didn't she?
No.
544 moves.
She got a lot of attention.
She did.
Yeah.
There's like, I just kind of want to get it back to the board because I'm super excited about one moment. Like here, the black rook can actually slide away from being in front of its own pawn. And how is this positioned? Because to me, it's super unclear.
Yeah, I mean, this is like a very standard rook ending. You get this often where you have an extra pass pawn, and the basic rule when you've got the extra pass pawn is ideal square for your rook behind the pass pawn, second best square for the rook next to the pass pawn, worst square for your rook in front of the pass pawn. And here you've got the second best situation, as you pointed out, Jovanka. It's not the best, but it's pretty good having it next to the pawn, and the winning technique is to try and bring the king over, right? You try to zoom the black king over to help the A pawn and push it down the board, and I would not be happy defending this position at all, let alone against the best endgame player of all time. I mean, David, do you think this is a technical draw, or how would you go about? Do you have to create counterplay on the king side maybe for white? I mean, it's really hard to know what the actual, if this is a draw or not. Well, I mean, David, you know better than me, I would have thought. So.
I mean, but you're right, Simon. I mean, I've spent dozens of hours, maybe more, just studying these endgames where black has, or one side has this extra A pawn, and even after all that, I still don't know exactly, or still not 100% sure on exactly what is winning. As you guys said, if you have the rook to the side of the pawn, usually you have fantastic chances. I like what Magnus has done, by the way. Just this white king maybe was heading towards pawns on this side to create some distraction, counterplay, and he's just said, no, I'm going to kind of I'm going to create this kind of force field, this barrier for the white king that it can't break through. And now black is pretty much ready to start going across. You kick the rook away, and when the rook has finally moved, then the black king will start heading towards this pawn to help. So, okay, Pragg, meanwhile, defending well as equally well. He's just trying to create this opposition to block off black's king from advancing.
And I mean, normally when you're defending these positions, as far as I'm aware, you should be trying to push your kingside pawns in anticipation for black's king coming to the other side of the board, and then you normally counter-attack black's pawns on that area of the board which is highlighted. That's the traditional way of trying to defend this, because you can't keep the black king from advancing forever. It will come in, so you need to get that counterplay, and it's often just a race situation. I mean, I think it's clear this game is kind of critical.
And look at Magnus. Let's go back to the players, because he just reacted there. He frowned, he's leant back. He's at 20 seconds, and he's not happy at all with what's happened. He knows he had a big advantage, but it could have been bigger than this. And yeah, I think with best play, maybe it is a draw, just because white's king is so active.
And he made that with 11 seconds left on the board.
Yeah, he blocks up that right side of the board, but white can open it up later. White can also give a check, kicking the black king back to a worse square.
I mean, what a save this will be. I mean, if Pragg saves this, it'll be tremendous. I mean, like, he's, you know, the young kid is showing great endgame skills, and it keeps him in the match. You know, he's got white in the next game. He wins that, he can still win the whole tournament. So it's a massive game, this one.
And massive moment, actually, there, Simon, because the king chased away the rook, and now we have 2 versus 3. And to my eyes, this looks like it should be just a draw. But it's maybe not an easy draw because of white's weak pawns.
Yeah, and Magnus wants to actually make it a race. If white gets time to just kind of move the king closer to its pawns, and if the white rook gets a chance to defend things, it should just be a draw. It's just black doesn't have a passed pawn, so Magnus is going to try and create one. I mean, that transition where, I mean, Pragg managed to get rid of that black runner, that black passed pawn, okay, in return for one of his own pawns on the other flank, I think that's just maybe the way he will save the game. I think it's just... That's why Magnus was kind of shaking his head. Just really clever from Pragg.
Fantastic save if he's able to still hold this one.
And that's massive for the match as well. If Pragg would have lost this game, he would have been in a must-win situation in the 2 last games, because remember, if he's going to win the tournament, he has to win in the rapid portion, Pragg. He needs to take all 3 points, a draw here, and it is very much still alive for him.
Yeah, and this one should be a draw. It's what you guys mentioned earlier. In terms of when you're attacking, when you have the extra pawns, you want your rook behind to support the pawns. You want your rook maybe from the side. But white's rook is the one that's going behind. Black's h-pawn is the only potential winner now. So go behind that pawn, stop it from advancing, and not that much can really go wrong. You can give a few checks to the black king if you really want, but at some point you bring your... Yeah, there we go. Pragg keeps checking. At some point you will bring that white rook to the h-file, and I don't see any way Magnus is really going to make progress. There we go, it goes behind the rook. Yeah. Really annoying checks incoming. Still some work to be done.
Yeah, it's very instructive how Pragg just knows these endings. He's not even pausing for thought. He just in the memory bank and giving a check. And I'm just checking the table bases, and yeah, Pragg has got the technique.
Yeah, it doesn't look too difficult now, to be honest. I mean, you can just continue giving another check with the white rook. You could possibly consider pushing white's pawn forward.
I was wondering that. It's always nice in these situations to force the draw, and what that means is if you can swap off with this move, one more pair of pawns, it is even easier to draw. And there's a little trick there. Got to be a bit careful.
Don't take that h-pawn.
No. This is the right pawn, and he's done it. I mean, brilliant play by Pragg. I mean, I think he's now got the draw in the bag, and what a save. What a save from such a tough position.
Magnus shaking his head.
Amazing save. How many players save positions like that against the world champion?
Yeah. Oh, it is a draw. Game 2, Pragg with phenomenal endgame play. He saves the draw. Look at that. He has the world #1 sitting by the computer, just looking at the position. He was supposed to win this game, Magnus Carlsen. It was an endgame.